Welcome to Global Dispatches, a podcast for the foreign policy and global development communities and anyone who wants a deeper understanding of what is driving events in the world today. I'm your host, Mark Leon Goldberg, editor of UN Dispatch. Enjoy the show. On September 5th, a special forces unit of the Guinean military attacked the presidential palace in the capital Conakry and deposed President Alpha Conde. This was the third coup in West Africa in the last 12 months. My guest today, David Zounmenou, is a senior research consultant at the Institute for Security Studies based in Pretoria. He explains the circumstances that led to this coup, and that includes the highly controversial decision last year by Alpha Conde to seek a constitutionally dubious third term in office. We also discuss how events in Guinea fit into a broader regional trend in which once duly elected presidents become authoritarian, lose their popular legitimacy, and are deposed in a coup. Today's episode was produced in part with the support of the Carnegie Corporation of New York as part of a series of episodes that feature African experts discussing peace and security issues in Africa. To access other episodes in this series, please visit globaldispatchespodcast.com. Now here is my conversation with David Zounmenou of the Institute for Security Studies.
In the early morning of September the 5th, we received news or information from our friends on the ground that there is a kind of attack in Guinea. Initially, we thought it was a kind of terrorist attack because the region is affected by a violent extremist group. But very soon, it had become very clear that the attacks were not carried by a violent extremist group, but by the special unit of the military in Guinea. And this is the special forces. What actually became clearer is that their intention to seize power. So the attacks were directed against the palace or where the president is staying. And during the day, it also was confirmed that the president was arrested, were kept in the military officer's custody, and then they announced the end of his regime. They dissolved the constitution of the country. At the same time, the government institution, the parliament and everything, and put on hold all the activities of government officials. The communique came later to announce that they seize power and they form the National Rally for Development Committee, and that will assume power from now. So that declaration actually ended all speculations, and later on we saw the footages of the president being driven around Conakry to the jubilation of a part of the people.
So you had this special forces unit that I take it was far outside the capital, that in the middle of the night drove to the capital. There was a shootout apparently in front of the presidential palace, and they installed themselves as the new leaders of the government. Can you just describe who is the leader of this group?
Look, the leader of this group, whose name is now Mamadou Doumbouya, was quite unknown in Guinea and the military political cycles until that coup. But in 2018, he was introduced to the president, Alpha Conde, allegedly on the advice of another president, the late Idriss Déby from Chad, to set up a special unit that will serve as a quick response mechanism against violent extremism. So that group was set and led by Mamadou Doumbouya. They are well-resourced, well-paid, well-equipped, and they enjoy special power. In fact, the real idea was for Alpha Conde to feel secure in his attempt to change the constitution and to be successful in his third term bid. And he needs the military to protect him. So the official reason was to fight terrorism. The unofficial one was to make sure that the power is secured and he remained at the helm of the governing body in Guinea. And Mamadou Doumbouya also was trained. I think he lived in France in the French Legion, underwent some training with the US in Israel, in Afghanistan, all over the world. So he is someone who has a very solid military culture and has a solid leadership ability, all things that have allowed him to initiate and be successful in the coup that ended Alpha Conde's power.
One wrinkle of this whole story is that Doumbouya and his special elite forces team at the time of the coup were in the midst of this US-led training session.
They were undergoing some training because the U.S. has a programs in the region to help them, to help the countries beef up their response strategies against violence extremism. So it has absolutely no connection with the development, the political development that comes with it.
Yeah, it was like a very embarrassing thing for the United States that this unit and this leader that they were in the midst of this training course, snuck out in the middle of the night to do a coup. It did not, I think, look well at the United States.
No, definitely. For any country that has a military partnership with a sovereign country such as Guinea, those developments are always embarrassing, but also speak to the structural problem that you can observe on the political scene. That most of the time they were not really forthcoming in denouncing or calling upon the leaders to adjust.
So you mentioned this earlier, but one of the other sort of ostensible reasons for this coup was that the former, now deposed President Alpha Conde had himself sort of perhaps like done a constitutional coup in a sense that he had the constitution adjusted so he could run for a third term. And that was part of the reason that Doumbouya mounted this military coup. Can you just briefly explain the political history, the political trajectory of Alpha Conde?
Yes, definitely. Look, Alpha Conde has been a hero in Guinea. Hero because of his courage to stand against the dictatorship. Back then, under the rule of Ahmed Sékou Touré, the first president of Guinea, who said no to France in 1958 and proclaimed Guinea independence. I think the second country to gain its independence after Ghana. Ghana was 1957. And the Sékou Touré of Guinea was seen as a symbol of a free Africa, a symbol of liberation, and also a symbol of a country that can stand its own grounds. So from that trajectory, he became an opponent to Lansana Conté, another colonel who became general, who staged the coup in 1984 at the death of Sékou Touré. And because of that, I think because of its political activism, Alpha Conde was sentenced to death by the military junta. But due to the pressure from African Union, regional bodies, and external partners, including France, his life was spared, and he was able to flee he was able to go to the exile. Now he returned to Guinea at the death of Lansana Conté. He himself victim of a coup that took place in 2008, and the coup was led by Captain Dadis Camara. So during the transition, he came to play a role in that transition. Of course, it was a military transition, very chaotic, very violent. whose hallmark has been the violent repression on the supporters that went on the stadium on the 29th of September.
Yeah, let's just to explain that. This was a mass atrocity event committed by the former military leader Camara, who shot up a stadium full of supporters of his opponent and systematically committed acts of sexual violence, rape against female supporters in that stadium as well. This is like well-documented mass atrocity event that occurred, was it like 2008 or so?
Absolutely. It was a mass atrocity. So he is still being looked for by the international justice to serve injustice, to respond to those atrocities. So it tells you something about the context in which Alpha Conde stood as a candidate and won the elections, and all the hope that were pinned upon him to restore democracy, to restore justice, and to be able to launch Guinea into political and socio-economic recovery. Unfortunately, he spoiled that opportunity that he had by changing the constitution against the opposition of political parties, but also social activists, arrested most of them, sent them to jails, and using the same special units, special forces to repress those who were actually protesting against his decision to amend the constitution to stand for the third term. So Guinea citizens were astonished to see most of the members of that unit in the street of Conakry, arresting them, kicking them, exactly in the same style as Daddy's Camara. And that's also explained the joy that they have to see the same unit seeing the special unit ending the role of Alpha Conde. But beyond the ideal of the reason that the military junta put forward to promote support for their action, there are also some personal elements that we need to take into considerations. I think many people have warned Alpha Conde that the head of a special unit was gaining in power and influence and is not happy with the situation in the country. He's planning something to do something, but apparently the president did not listen to them. Or if he listened, he was trying to devise a strategy to neutralize Doumbouya. So it was just a matter of time that Doumbouya acted first before the president sacked him. So it was also a matter of personal survival between the two leaders, and unfortunately, Conde lost in that bid.
As you describe it, Conde seems to be like a sadly familiar story. You have like a heroic liberation leader who comes to power, does some important reforms, is popular initially, but then undermines the reputation, undermines the democratic institutions of the country, starts to fall out to favor in terms of popularity, and then you have this coup leader, and it seems that the coup was like broadly popular as far as we can tell. I mean, the scenes of jubilation in the streets seem to suggest that the people, at least of Conakry, are ready for a change and were sort of pleased with this development. Is that a fair characterization?
Yeah, definitely. And I need to insist on two factors. The first one is the fact that Doumbouya is from the same ethnic group as Conde, and that really dispels or simply neutralizes the ethnic manipulation argument. The second one is that the jubilation that you saw is not only located in Conakry, but also in the hometown of Alpha Conde, which tells you something about the attachment of the majority of Guinea citizens to the respect of democratic governance, the respect of the rule of law that Alpha Conde floated by his decision to amend the constitution and to sabotage the democratization project in Guinea.
So even in his hometown, they were cheering his overthrow.
No, definitely. There were people who were celebrating because they were not really happy about the outcome of a decision to amend the constitution for him to stand on the third term. but he was just surfing on the manipulation of ethnic differences because he thought he was the only one to prevent Cellou Dalein Diallo, who is a Pearl and who was also one of the main leaders, to win power because he hailed from one of the majority community, 33% of the country. He thought he was the only one to prevent him from getting to power under the slogan, everyone but Cellou Dalein Diallo. So to see people from his hometown and to see a leader emerging from his own ethnic group conducting and succeeding in that coup was almost a relief for the majority of Guinea citizens.
What has been the international response to this coup so far?
I think we can see that the international community responded in principle. But I'm sure that behind the diplomatic sentences in phraseology, there have been a sense of relief, but probably also concerns expressed because of a trend that democratization was taken in the West African region. Mind you, this is the third military coup witnessed in the region. 2 in Mali and 1 in Guinea, and many other countries are following the same pattern, including Cote d'Ivoire and Benin, where leaders simply manipulate the constitution or violate human rights, but still remain in power because they have the support of the military. So we see the reaction from the African Union, which has to be conformed to its normative framework. We also seen the reaction from ECOWAS suspending Guinea. All that in line with the normative architecture that they put in place to root out coup from the political culture of the continent. But at the same time, I think the reaction of the African Union or the ECOWAS or any other international body actually left Guinea citizens disappointed because they were saying normally this could have made sense if these institutions were more vocal, condemning and punishing leaders who were simply manipulating the political process in their country to create a bed for instability. So
that's interesting.
There is a problem of credibility of those institutions.
So that's interesting. So ECOWAS, the African Union, when a coup happens, there's a familiar playbook that they follow, right? They suspend the member, they maybe impose sanctions, as I believe ECOWAS did in this case. But when members of these bodies, ECOWAS, the Community of West African States, or the African Union, manipulate the constitution in a way to engineer or solidify their grip on power, there's less of a kind of playbook that they follow. Sometimes they grudgingly accept it, sometimes they willingly accept it. So I see what you're saying, that many people in Guinea were perhaps disappointed if earlier these bodies, ECOWAS and African Union, didn't come down hard on Alpha Conde when he engineered the constitution to permit him a third term.
Yes, definitely, because they most of the time took excuse on the concept of sovereignty and non-interference in domestic affairs of a member state. But that doesn't really hold water anymore, because what is happening behind the curtain of national sovereignty not only becomes a threat to national security, but also regional security or regional stability. And that needs to be taken into consideration when decisions are made in Addis Ababa or in Abuja.
So you mentioned earlier that there is something of a trend in the region right now with 3 coups, I guess 4 if you count maybe like the disputed succession in Chad. Of just coups in the region. I mean, is this like a contagion? Could we see this spread further? And what accounts for this seemingly, large number of coups in one relatively small region in a short period of time?
No, I think the West Africa has done relatively well in terms of democratization process in 1990s. And when we look at the coup indicators, from 1956 up to, I would say, 2000, early 2000, the ratio was at least 4 coups per month in the region, with countries such as Nigeria, Benin, Ghana holding the lead in terms of between 10 and 15 coups each attempt or successful coups. And between 2000, we've seen less coups in the region because most governments came to power through the electoral processes. And some were genuine, others were not, but elections have become the way to see leaders in power. But for the past decades, we've seen the reversals of those gains because if the civil society activists were successful in preventing the amendment of the constitution for the third term in Nigeria, Senegal, Burkina Faso, and also in Benin between 2000 and 2010, the trend has shifted in 2012 with the first coup observed in Mali, led by Captain Amadou Sanogo. And that's opened the what we are witnessing now, the wave of military intrusion. And the way the regional bodies, regional organizations dealt with that coup in 2012 sent very contradictory messages to coup protests in the region. And we know that that region has been affected by military coups, but also by civil wars. The most notorious ones are in Liberia, Sierra Leone, and Cote d'Ivoire, with devastating impact on the security architecture of the country. So what we are witnessing now, particularly this year, 4 military coups, say something about the deterioration of the democratic construction in that region that need external partners and also political actors at home and abroad to rethink about the way they define the institutions, but also associated citizens to building their own legitimacy. And because of the absence of that popular legitimacy, the military officers think that they have the right to restore democracy, which is a danger. And also this is something that the additional protocol of ECOWAS tried to warn against when it was ratified or when it was first made public in 2001.
So you can almost draw a straight line between the role of civil society and civil society's ability to ensure respect for constitutional processes and democracies to sort of the reduction of the role of civil society and the increase in coups.
Definitely, because in most of the countries, civil society actors have been arrested. The activities have been restricted, and they cannot really raise concern that they want to raise. Even the media sometimes fell under oppression or has to be forced into exile. So their role as a watchdog is limited, which created the vacuum that only the military can be caused by silencing civil society activists, by sending political actors into prison. The president believes in his power because he has a military on his side. But unfortunately, then those military officers also want power, and they understand how vulnerable the president is when he does not have any legitimacy, any institutional legitimacy, or any popular legitimacy whatsoever.
So we are speaking Tuesday, September 28th. I saw just a few hours ago that the coup leaders in Guinea have issued a statement saying that they are setting up a transitional government and that no members of that transitional government will be permitted to run for political office or at least a presidency or prime minister when the coup, whenever elections happen. How, I guess, hopeful are you that this coup may lead to a peaceful transfer of power?
No, I'm always skeptical when coup leaders are planning for transition. And we have a wealth of experience in the region to remain doubtful until things are completed. We've seen it in 2012 in Mali. That's really because of the way that transition is managed. Mali is still in political instability and security problem up to today. We've seen it in Chad. We also saw it in Guinea, I think, in 1984, in 2008, and now. So those experiences really call for a cautious approach to the transition. I've seen the transition document. It's calling for the establishment of transitional authority, saying that people who will be part of a transitional government should not stand for the election, which are good things in principle. But the transition document also failed to specify the duration of the transition. How long is it going to take for it to be completed? When are the elections going to be held? And some of those questions, I guess, will still be discussed when political actors, social actors met with the military junta, and that is key. But already, the ECOWAS has already made announcement that they don't have more than 6 months to plan the elections and return the country to constitutional order. Whether that call from ECOWAS is going to be heeded remains to be seen. But the position already from Guinea and the response from the military junta is that it's up to the Guinea citizen to decide how long the transition will last. And that's already the line of confrontation between the regional body and the local authorities.
So I suppose we'll see this play out over the next several weeks. David, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much, Mark. It was a pleasure talking to you.
All right. Thank you all for listening. Thank you to David Zounmenou for speaking with me from Pretoria. And just one disclaimer that the views and opinions expressed in this conversation belong solely to those who expressed said views and opinions. All right, we'll see you next time. Thanks. Bye.